Okay, so I'm back in the chair after a bit of a small break. I feel like it's been a while since I've had a lot to say about a Grandpa Clone Customs drop, and this time there is a lot to cover. We've got roughly a dozen or so items to cover, from full figures to long-awaited upgrade parts and individual helmets. I want to kick this off on a high note: the shock heavy upgrade arms. So rather than this being a full-on new product release, this is an upgrade pack for an existing figure. I own about 4 shock heavies, and have just decided to laterally upgrade these from solid red arms that GCC released these clones with initially. One thing to note is that since around October, GCC has decided that all future minifigures produced in-house would always come with printed arms. This is a noteworthy upgrade to me only because I am a fan of the color red. Now, I know that sounds silly, yeah, but I think it's natural for me to like red clones, or really any figure on the red spectrum given my channel's branding. Going back to what I was saying though, actually obtaining this arm upgrade is really a big thing for me because I feel that heavy shocks deserved a long-awaited upgrade. I'm hoping that in the future, GCC will consider selling another release of these spray-painted false dual molds, or maybe even do a false pad-printed dual mold effect. So speaking of single-made parts, GCC also made a series of 3 different BARC Trooper helmets to be applied to clone grunts. Now I know that technically it isn't accurate to apply these helmets to generic grunt torsos, but as far as I'm aware, there aren't really any producers making BARC torsos with satchels or strap prints with relevant insignias. So for now, I just applied the standard official LEGO torso from various battle packs throughout the 2020 design style. My favorite BARC helmet of the batch has to be the Republic insignia. I equipped 2 troopers with either full black arms or just one black arm, sort of like how Neo has it. I feel like with these parts you have to just take some creative liberty and diversify your clone army. I also just applied helmets to the 501st Grunt torsos and legs for the 501st Legion and 332nd Company troopers. These are less notable to me, but are infinitely useful for anybody who wants to add a small cheap upgrade to their collection. I rarely ever cover single upgrade helmets unless it's something noteworthy or easily applicable and useful, but I feel you can't really go wrong with owning various Clone Battalion BARC helmets. Okay, now that we've pushed all of the small upgrade parts out of the way, I wanted to talk a bit about the V2 Shadow Troopers that were released consecutively after the Shadow Commander. The Commander was released in a previous wave, however GCC has taken the demand and success of the Commander and produced replica helmet V2 Shadow Troopers. This is a noteworthy advancement from the V1 for only one important reason. If you have this minifigure in hand, you'll appreciate the fact that GCC used a special shimmer pad ink that isn't present on the previous version of this figure. There are a couple of figures where this palette update has occurred, from the Purge Trooper version A having the same static red ink as the V1 Shadow Trooper, but version B, the newer Shadow Troopers, as well as future figure releases, will have the red shimmer ink applied to the visor. Now don't get me wrong, it's not a huge thing, nor is it a lateral upgrade to die for, but if you appreciate the differences, especially in applicable things like toy photography, or you just enjoy collecting noteworthy variants, the Shadow Grunt is probably a worthwhile upgrade from the previous version. GCC also added another 2 Airbornes to their product portfolio, one of which being the weathered 442nd, which, yeah, as the name implies, is a trooper with lots of battle damage and scratches. The 442nd is the next edition of the 442nd units, the previous being the well-aged generic Grunt, which I unfortunately do not have. This Airborne is equipped with the usual GCC Airborne replica helmet, as well as a cloth cama to flesh out the design. The 442nd is by far one of the more unique Airborne designs that GCC has produced because of the battle damage marks which, if I'm not wrong, aren't featured on any previous Airborne unit. Alongside the Swamp Airborne, we also received my personal favorite Shock Airborne, which I feel you just can't go wrong with the color red. This trooper features the standard clean Airborne design that is inherited from other templates GCC has done of other Airbornes. I've amassed a pretty decently sized army of Shock Troopers, so I'm always happy to add some diversity into the unit with the first Shock Airborne units to ever be released. I hope this figure receives a restock in the future, because I anticipate that these will probably sell out quickly on the reseller storefronts. The Elite Squad Trooper is another generic grunt released alongside this wave, also featuring a replica helmet with that same signature shimmer ink found on the Shadow Grunt except in green. I wouldn't say it's a highly requested figure, but it is definitely something evergreen for fans of the Bad Batch, as these troopers, which to be honest weren't even clones but conscripts, appeared a couple times throughout the Bad Batch alongside Crosshair. I don't actually have that much to say on it, other than it's well executed and well detailed, especially for a generic grunt. Thorn is the only named clone to appear in this drop and is probably the most notable figure in the drop. I'm actually very excited about this figure's release because I feel that it has been a highly requested product that is in the territory of something GCC would produce. I'm very surprised that it hasn't come sooner, but I heard that the main issue with this figure not having been released is because it is difficult to align the thin helmet markings. Every release by GCC usually has a flagship item. Last wave it was the Shadow Commander, and the wave before it was a modernized Neo. Same could be said for Commander Thorn this wave, because if there isn't anything else that is worth picking up, this would be my last resort to suggest to a fan of the Clone Wars. So I'm only going to briefly touch on this trooper since it's going to get its own video, but the Forgotten Legion clone is yet another unit that is technically being released by some resellers around the time between this current wave and the next wave that is going to be dropped later this week. If you'd like to check out the previous video I did on the V1, you can do so by visiting the link in the description. That's all I have for now, and as always, I'd like to thank Yoshan of GCC for sending these out for me to review. If you want to get a small discount on some products mentioned here, you can visit Tom the Builder or Bricks and Figs DE and apply my promo code BrickFleet at checkout to support the channel.